Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Cassie, and I'm the Director of Development at Food Recovery Network. So excited to dig in with you all today. We have an amazing panel all about everything from going from the campus to your career path. We have an amazing group of panelists that are FRN alum, being rock stars in their career path. So thanks so much for joining, and thanks to the folks tuning in at a later date. So, like I said, this conversation is all around graduating, whether you're a student that's about to graduate, have already graduated in the FRN network. We'll be chatting about tips for adding FRN to your resume, career path, and how that's working with the Food Recovery Network chapter has influenced your career. Um, just to give you a brief grounding, I imagine a lot of you or all of you are already familiar with FRN, but in case not, we're the largest student-led movement recovering, reducing food waste and ending hunger in the US. And here's a snapshot of some of our amazing chapters. It looks like we have some folks from Santa Fe joining as well. Thanks so much. Just want to always open up our conversations with some acknowledgments here. There's a lot on the slide here, but just want to acknowledge that at Food Recovery Network, we know that racial equity is tied to all facets of our work when we're talking about climate change, when we're talking about food insecurity. And so we're very committed to racial equity here at Food Recovery Network, and just wanted to acknowledge and recognize the amazing groups a part of our network, a part of our conversation, and the folks joining us today. So thanks so much for joining us and being a part of the conversation. To introduce myself a little bit further, like I said, I'm Cassie and I'm the Director of Development at Food Recovery Network. So what I do in day to day is a lot of fundraising and grant writing. So I'm really excited when I get to have conversations like this with the amazing students that drive our work forward. You all, I always say, make my job easier to shout FRN from the rooftops because you're such rock stars and make it easy to help raise money for this growing movement. I graduated with my undergrad in 2018 from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a bachelor's in sociology and psychology and economics minors. I've been on the team for 8 years ever since I graduated, which has been an amazing journey. And just some other fun facts about me here on the screen, including a picture of my dog, because why not? So with that, I will turn it over to our amazing panelists here today just to briefly introduce themselves. Kelsey, I'll get started with you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kelsey Rogers. I graduated from Roger Williams University in class of 2017. I live in Rhode Island, and I now a creative strategist at Boston Globe Media. I majored in graphic design, and I started here as a designer, and moved over to creative strategy last year in the ad department.
Thanks so much for joining us, Kelsey. Grace, I'll turn it to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Grace Liao and I'm calling in from Berkeley, California. My FRN chapter was at Carleton College where I studied sociology and anthropology. And I'm now working as a food systems consultant at FoodWorks Group, which is focused on progress in local and regional food systems. And back to you, Cassie.
Thanks, Grace. Another sociology major. Love it. And Jack, I'll have you round us out.
I'm glad to be here, everybody. I'm Jack Steinman, he, him pronouns. I'm a sustainability specialist at the County of San Mateo Sustainability Department, and I'm an alum from San Francisco State, where we have a chapter.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Before we dig into our amazing discussion here today, since we do have some graduating students or recent alum, just want to share a couple of resources in the mix here. So first of all, if you're a graduating student leader and perhaps a leading chapter member, on the exec board or leadership team for your chapter, we have amazing resources to help you transition the legacy of your chapter and pass the baton on. And so we have QR code here, and then Sarah, who's on in the background. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of these links in the chat, that would be great. We also have our amazing student and alumni advisory board. You can be a current student or be an alum. All of our amazing panelists here today are currently a part or previously a part of SOB, or Student Alumni Advisory Board. Kelsey, I'll just put you on the spot if you could share a couple words of your experience with SOB right now.
Yeah, I've been on a couple years now. I think it's just a great way to stay involved. That's really what I wanted was, I was feeling really sad about not being in food recovery anymore because it was such a big part of my life. And so it's just a really great opportunity to stay involved, in different ways as well, right? So I don't recover food all the time, but I am on the communications subcommittee, so helping to write blog posts, do social. And honestly just staying in touch with other people from around the country. So it's fairly low commitment, but you can be as involved as you want, right? So if you want to be more active, then you can. So yeah, definitely recommend everyone apply and get involved.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And yeah, applications open up on June 1st. If you're interested to apply, the QR code here takes you to our SOB webpage on the website. You can see the amazing students and alumni currently a part of the movement, or part of that advisory board group. And then you'll see the applications launch there. And then finally, I just wanted to share, we do have a LinkedIn group. Of course, FRN has a LinkedIn page at large, which I think this QR code will take you there. But we also have a specific alumni LinkedIn group. So encourage folks to join that, where a different alumni and staff will just share different resources, job opportunities. And then also just want to throw out there, if there's any folks on the call that want to connect on LinkedIn with me, I'll share my LinkedIn in the chat. Always happy to chat with folks one-on-one. And then I'll put that to our panelists as well if you're open to being connected to other folks in the network, using LinkedIn as a tool. Definitely encourage folks to be in touch with us. All right, let's dig into the good stuff. I'm going to start up sharing my screen. Beautiful. So as we dig in, I'm just going to have some discussion questions for our panelists, but please don't be afraid to ask any questions in the chat or the Q&A. Like I said, Sarah on our team is in the background helping to support with the tech, so she'll bubble up any questions that come up. But just to get us fully started, let's have the panelists introduce themselves a bit further. Kelsey, I'll go ahead and start back with you. If you could share how you were involved with Food Recovery Network at your school and kind of the transition into your career path now.
Yeah, so I founded the chapter at Roger Williams in 2014. Um, the I actually found out about it through, I think it was like a soul pancake video or something that was going around. If anyone remembers those, I saw someone talking about it from FRN National, and thought wanted to do it at my school, and I stayed involved towards we grew the chapter to about 100 people, and towards my junior senior year I got more involved, kind of in the admin side of things, not doing the actual recovery, but promoting the group and getting funding, and had a lot of public speaking opportunities, things like that. And uh, I, stay involved as much as I can because it's something I'm passionate about. But yeah, my career is in a different spot. So yeah, that's I kind of I'm a graphic design major, so I knew that that wasn't necessarily the way that I was going to go. But I wanted to, stay involved because it's what I like cared about.
I'll also just give a shout out that Kelsey's email signature at the bottom says talking to anyone. What is it, Kelsey? It's like talking to anyone about food waste or something.
Oh, telling I don't know, what did I say?
Something.
I don't know, telling everyone to stop wasting food, whoever will listen. Something like
Yeah.
that. Because it's just I talk about it all the time. And it's kind of become a punchline for people in my life, because I bring it up all the time. It's just kind of like walk the walk. If you need to change your behaviors, like, if you're trying to change other people's behaviors, you have to change your own. So I do talk about it nonstop.
I love it. Grace, I'll let you go next just to introduce yourself a bit further.
Awesome. Yeah, I first got involved with my food recovery network chapter at Carleton just through like a typical volunteer sign up for recovering in the dining hall. And then from there was really hooked. And my chapter was sort of designed to have 4 or 5 different program directors that would share and collaborate and help run the chapter. So I ended up applying, I think it was at the end of my freshman year, and becoming a program director and doing that for the following 3 years. And then at the same time was studying sociology and anthropology and had the opportunity to really focus on food and environmental anthropology through more of my academic studies. So I think that was a cool complement, both academically and then through the FRN chapter. And from there, just got more interested in doing other food and activism related things on campus and ended up finding an internship at a nonprofit organization that did a lot of food recovery and was able to get that sort of funded between my junior and senior year by the college. So that was sort of my first hands-on like introduction to that as a career and a possible work avenue. And I was lucky enough to go on and work with that organization, which is called Berkeley Food Network, for a couple years. That was my first job out of college. Really awesome introductory to food recovery work in the Bay Area. And there's a lot of also policy related food recovery things happening in this region, which I'm sure Jack and I can share a little bit more about later. Um, and from there, after working there, sort of pivoted a little bit, and I'm now working more on a research focused role as a food systems consultant. So working both locally in California and on other projects more broadly in the food system.
Thank you, Grace. Appreciate it. Yeah, Jack, I'll turn it to you.
So I started a, sorry, can you all hear me? All right. I started my former chapter at San Francisco State. It was my freshman year. I think it was very similar to your story, Kelsey, where I wrote a paper about food waste. I learned about Food Recovery Network, and then it was something that I had started on campus. The program, it was a huge part of my college experience. I think that's not unusual for anyone involved with FRN. But just leading those food recoveries for 4 years, I was at SF State. It was really the on ramp to the career I have now. Um, Started with the food recoveries in my freshman year. That led to just a student role on campus in the Environmental Resource Center, where I brought the food recovery work with me, um, mostly to get funding for it for student government. But then that led to an internship with the EPA. That kind of got me involved with government and the intersection of food waste, food recovery, and government. And Grace mentioned some policy happening in California that's really catalyzed a lot of food recovery. Uh, there's a law called SB 1383 that requires local governments to play a role in promoting and requiring food recovery from large businesses. And I graduated just at the right time to start getting involved with that. I landed an AmeriCorps fellowship that placed me with a city in the Bay Area. I was working with their environmental services division, and right that role I had, it was the fellowship. It was about a year and a half. I was doing all kinds of environmental local government work, but one of my big projects was looking into how this new food recovery law would impact a city. And because I was doing that work, it led to there was an opportunity that opened up with the county of San Mateo, which is just south of San Francisco, north of Silicon Valley. And it was a lucky break for sure. I was well positioned for it. And it's just been a great role, a great organization, a great job that I've held on to for the last 6 years.
That's amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing and welcoming us all into the space together. I feel like, Jack, what you were just sharing really speaks to the next question, just around how FRN helps to influence your career path. And particularly would love to hear, just starting from you and Grace, and then Kelsey will move to you, of how that, the passion that you had for your FRN chapter then translated into your career. And particularly for Jack and Grace, you both have careers and jobs within food recovery and food systems work. So would love to just hear more about that from you both. Yeah.
I can kick off and then maybe pass to you, Jack. Did that sound good? Um, yeah, I think what excited me most about food recovery work was sort of that being that bridge between fighting hunger and then also working within your community. So that sort of from a job perspective drove me to look at a lot of hunger-based nonprofit work. And that was sort of my entry point into looking at that as a career. And I think it also connected nicely with a lot of the like academic things I was studying and being interested in just like the community based side of social sciences and being able to use some of that stuff that I had learned in my major and sort of in a more applicable way. So I really enjoyed being able to work at a nonprofit that was very like hunger related, and I was the food recovery manager there, and sort of like Jack was saying, that the timing worked out really well for me as well, because it was right after COVID, and that caused a lot of, I would say, like shifts and catalysts in the food recovery space. Um, just with that being an interruption to the food system and prompting a lot of people to get engaged with local food recovery work due to all of those disruptions to the grocery system. So it was a very like exciting and impactful time to get involved in all of that. And I felt like a lot of the work from running the FRN chapter was really like directly applicable, and it was exciting to see that come to life in a community, and then also see that program grow over the years. So I think when I left after 3 years or so, we had recovered like over 2 million pounds of food through that work. So really exciting like metric, and to be able to see all of the recoveries that made that possible. Um, with a lot of different types of businesses as well, other than just the dining halls at a more campus level. So yeah, I'll pause there and pass it to Jack.
Berkeley Food Network is a great organization. Very cool. Um, yeah, encourage folks to go check them out. I think for me, when I was my work in, I think trying to find funding for the food recovery work in college was when I look back, that was um that was that was a part of the food recovery chapter leadership role um that really drove me towards getting involved with student government. And because of that, I got sucked into this world of local government as well. Student government is like a on ramp for working for a city, town, county. Um, and when I was when I it was great experience when I was looking at fellowships with local governments to say, look, I've done these things with on a college campus. This was a program we set up. It had climate benefits. It helped feed our community. Um, and that's very relatable. That's if you look at a city town, if they have the bandwidth to focus on programs that support the community, this is the types of things they want to look for. Um, but another thing too, with especially going back to funding food recovery, that's something that's been like a theme of my life for the last 10 years. I feel like it's a big thing that's part of my job now. Um, but there's also local governments. A lot of them they have an emphasis or a goal to reduce waste. If they aren't overtly saying we're going to invest in feeding our community members, which many of them do, but not all of them do. A lot of them have incentives to expand the life of their landfills. And diverting organics from the landfill is a major way to do that. Food recovery fits right there with it. Um, so being involved in food recovery, getting sucked into the student government world, and then finding a pathway into local government. Um, it just has really taught me that these two things, they line up very well. Uh, Food recovery, local government, I think that is a great career pathway. Um, Especially in like this, you just have to look for like the sustainability angle of food recovery.
Thank you so much. And Kelsey, would love to hear from you, with your role not being directly as tied to food waste and food recovery, but like you said, something you're continually passionate about. How have you found ways to kind of weave your passion for food recovery into your current career?
Yeah, so well, first to just give a quick rundown of what I do day to day is I work in the ad department of the Boston Globe. So um brands can work with publishers in different ways than just like placing a print ad or something, right? You can have branded content where you're saying, you know, I want people who read the Globe to see my brand in this way, and I want them to feel like I have these certain values, right? And so um if there's a company that says I want people to read something that tells them my company cares about sustainability, right? So we might um, give suggestions on what they can do to work with us. We have a lot of different ad products. So my job is when clients reach out and different brands reach out to us and say, I have this much money. These are our brand goals. What can we do with you? My job is to help put that together and put that package together. Um, and so a lot of times what I'll do, and again, back to this being a punchline at work, is that I'm always suggesting if there's any sustainability angle or social justice angle. I'm putting in kind of thought starters in there. Um, I'll give one example is we had National Association Realtors come to us before, and um, I know that they have a close relationship with Food Recovery Network, and I had reached out to Regina, who, if you don't know, is executive director of Food Recovery Network, and invited her on a call with me, and was like, maybe we can tell them, if they work with us, if they run ads with us and everything, we'll donate a portion of the proceeds to Food Recovery Network. And that's an incentive for a brand who cares about that to work with a certain publisher. And it's kind of a lot about relationship building as well, right? So you can get really creative in that type of strategy. And I've done it for even like if PepsiCo is working with us, I'll look up and see what their, reduction goals are and be like, well, talk about that. You should tell people, like, if you want people to think this certain thing about your brand, talk about the specifics. And I'll always suggest that because I want them to write about it and I want to pressure them from my little tiny roll behind a desk and in whatever way I can do that. So, but I also I'm a graphic designer, so I by trade, so I have a freelance business as well, and I really focus my freelance efforts on stuff that um, is fulfilling for me, and that is obviously in food waste. So I work with Matriarch Foods very closely, and they are who I was introduced to through Regina. Um, and they are an upcycled food company. So they take remnants from kind of factory manufacturing. So if there's a factory that is working with carrots and celery, right? They'll take any end cuts and use it in their product. And so they make all sorts of product, both consumer facing and commercial product that just the Cisco's of the world, use in their cooking. So it's been really great being able to work with them, having industry knowledge too, as a designer as well is really helpful on the back end, being able to explain things, working on pitch decks and being able to explain complex processes when you're in it is different if you would just be hiring like any designer, right? So it's kind of put me into a niche specialty there, which is exactly where I want to be.
That's great. I love appreciate you sharing, and I love the examples of, being able to weave food recovery and your passion and your experience into so many different ways. I know there's another example. We used to have a SOB member, Angela Lynn, who she had an internship during her time during college, and I want to say it was with a furniture company or something. And she was just an intern for the summer, had, something to do with her actual major and career path that she was looking into. But she noticed that they had a cafeteria on campus, typical to a college dining hall, but just on the cafeteria's campus. And she actually was able to start a food recovery program on that cafeteria campus, which was really inspiring. Her role and internship was something completely different, but she was able to bring in her passion for food recovery. So it fits in all shapes and sizes. So for the folks on the call, we have students with all different majors, all different backgrounds, going into different areas. And we wanted to showcase that there are, examples like Jack and Grace where there's food systems related work, but also places where, may not be as directly tied to your work at FRN, but there's ways to weave it in. And so, with that, I wanted to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty with our panelists here. So, can you all just share a bit about what skills you had and built during your experience at your FRN chapter and how that kind of led into your career now? Is there anything surprising or unexpected that you learned during your time with your chapter that you now apply? Particularly thinking about with students, may not be bridging those gaps together, but so many of these skills can apply. So, yeah, I'm just going to leave it open, see who wants to jump in there first.
I'm happy to share. Um, so I think the most surprising kind of skill that I maybe started building, I think it's one that you're always growing, is managing different personalities in a group. So I think a lot of us here probably were holding leadership roles in our chapter, and I learned pretty quickly that conflict, even when people are doing volunteer work, happens, right? Especially volunteer work when everyone has different goals, really. Like you're kind of you all have different personal goals and reasons why you're involved. And that just creates conflict. It creates tension when people are trying to uh, you know, maybe take the rein, a lot of different people taking reins and steering a group, right? And it's like, how do you manage that? Because you have to respect that everyone has their own ideas. And so I had gotten help and advice from mentors on campus, from like the director of community engagement was a nice like mentor for me in terms of like this actual kind of day to day. How do I manage this like just personality difference in the group, right? And how can I uh just learn to work with people in a productive way. And it was just a big lesson in like collaboration. So that has definitely been a lesson that I have taken with me. Um, and yeah, I think just making sure you have people, you don't know everything. Have people that are on campus who can help you navigate that, even if it's like an upperclassman that maybe is just a second opinion. Yeah, I think just working with a big group of people.
The group projects never end.
Exactly.
You can go for it, Jack.
Okay. I think what I want to say is very related to that. Um, but it's uh, learning how to engage with different stakeholders and navigate and understand what kind of messaging works for those different parties. That's a big thing from that I look back at FRN is helping me improve on. Because when you're trying to set up food recovery, it's one conversation to have with the dining hall. It's another with the food recovery nonprofit who's receiving your food. It's another with the students who you need to recruit to help package and transport the food. It's another with someone who you're looking to fund the work, to buy the packaging. That's something that um, at the time I don't think I was like actively thinking like, okay, this is I'm honing my my sales pitches, but it's in a real way it really was, and that's something that's translated to my job today. I manage a few other my role today. I manage a county-wide food recovery program for this SB 1383 law in San Mateo County, but I have other responsibilities as well in that stakeholder engagement piece, um, learning how to identify who's involved in a project, who should be, um, who needs to have a louder voice, a smaller voice in it, um, building consensus and then moving something forward. That's really that's a valuable thing that I got lots of practice doing it as an FRN chapter president.
Yeah, you do. That is something you kind of do as someone in food recovery is you sort your turn kind of turn into a little linchpin among a ton of different groups in your town and the campus and your friend group, right? You're kind of forced into that. And that yeah, that I mean it kind of even if you don't want to be in a leadership position, you're kind of like you have to be. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, because you're literally making something happen that was not happening before.
Hmm.
Something
Yeah.
that's very not it's well, we all agree it's nonsense. Food shouldn't be wasted.
And
That part
sometimes it's
is
like
that's an easy sales point.
and sometimes it's sensitive because you don't people don't like being kind of shown the problem at first too. So you're kind of like having to be, kind of sensitivity training there too of like, I know you didn't mean it, but here's a problem, right? And yeah.
And you have to like there's spinning you need to do to be like
Yeah.
you're not doing something wrong. There's an opportunity here to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
something
Yeah. You learn a lot
excellent.
of buzzwords. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of framing, but it goes a long way.
That's great. Yeah, Grace, do you have anything else to
Yeah.
add here?
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. And just to sort of spin it, I feel like for folks in the room who I think a lot of you shared, you're like looking for your first job or just getting into the job market. I feel like it's also this skill around just like cross-sector collaboration and managing a group is like somewhat a unique skill that you can develop through leadership at an FRN chapter, and framing that in your first job search, I think can be really powerful just to showcase these skills that you've been able to build that maybe, others in your position looking for their first job haven't had such exposure. And then to add one other thing, sort of that I've reflected on that I was able to sort of start exploring and building through FRN is sort of putting together those pieces around like data and storytelling. I think there's a lot of super impactful numbers behind all the work in your food recovery chapters. And one piece around that, like data analytics and just being able to actually like track all those numbers, put them together and like shape those into a compelling story can really be a really useful skill. And also, as you all think about getting people on board, those sales pitches and those different pieces, being able to not just have the numbers, but like really translate that into the story and get people excited and committed, I think is another useful skill that I sort of started building and thinking about through food recovery.
These are such great points. I mean, I'm just hearing like relationship building, collaborations, conflict resolutions, so many different ways to communicate with people. Yeah, through data, as Grace was saying, but also being able to bring different groups together to overcome, a problem and create a solution. There's so many skills that are so tangible that can apply that you can speak to when you're interviewing with folks, the common questions of like, tell me about a challenge that you help to overcome. Like I'm sure many of you have been through the messy food recoveries, that don't go the way as planned. Just using those as real life examples of how you help to gather people and overcome a problem. So with that, I wanted to hear from you all as well of how did you actually talk about your effort and experience, especially as Grace said, with so many folks looking for their first job. What did it look like on your resume? How did you talk about it in the interviews? And then for our attendees here, just in a minute, I'll share my screen just to give you some examples if you want to take a screenshot. We'll also be sharing a blog post later as well that'll have, ways you can include Efren on your resume. So while our folks chat, I'll just be sharing the screen and there'll be 2 slides if you want to take a screenshot. But yeah, Kelsey, if we can start with you, just to share a bit more about the interview process.
Yeah, if I, bring it up, it's a lot about time management that I'll talk about, both as just a student leader, you're managing your own time, but also navigating schedules of other volunteers, of partner agencies, of the dining halls when you have a limited window. So you really have to be, as you all know, good at managing that time, yours and others. Um, Also a budget, managing a budget. I know all groups are um, set up differently, but I know, food recovery gives you like kind of an allowance, right? But I also had budget from my student government, so seeing where we wanted to allocate that, and getting the group's consensus on that as well. And like Jack was just saying too, is just being able to work with many different stakeholders. Nowadays, I would probably more say like cross collaboration among department, stakeholders is how I would phrase it now. But that is, I can't stress enough how invaluable that is in the professional world. It's probably one of the biggest assets I can say in my career is being able to work with various different teams who have different objectives.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Kelsey. I think um, thinking back to some of my like job interview scenarios, not everyone that you might be speaking to is super familiar with food recovery or like what a food recovery network chapter is, right? So I would sort of showcase that on my resume, almost treating it like a job or an internship. It is a lot of responsibility and um, is sort of that same function. And then using like an example, I think you can think about your unique role at the chapter, how your chapter works, and sort of paint a little bit of a picture for whoever you're speaking with to showcase some of those skills that Kelsey was mentioning. And I think you also have the opportunity to like tailor it to whatever type of job you're looking for, because there are such diverse skill sets we've talked about so far that, you really are wearing so many hats running a food recovery chapter. So I think you have the opportunity to pull in some examples from different parts of that work, depending on the job you're looking at. And that was sort of the approach that I would take in job interviews, giving a little bit of background on what Food Recovery Network is, how the chapter works, and showcasing that sort of level of responsibility, how it is almost like a job that you're taking on, and then finding an example that's sort of best suited to that role that I was looking at or speaking about.
And I absolutely brought this up when I was interviewing for my first jobs out of college. Um, it's been a while, so I'm a little foggy on exactly how I framed it. But um, I if I didn't do this, I should have definitely explained the leadership role that food recovery puts you in. I absolutely agree with Grace that you need to explain what food recovery is, and really frame what the problem was that you were trying to solve, and then your role in solving it. So there's so much. Definitely, I would encourage you if you bring this up in an interview, lay out the foundation, explain food recovery, and then really tell the story of what your role in addressing that problem was. Um, yeah, so like what kind of actions you took if you were in a leadership role, like what were your responsibilities? And then also it's good to call out the significance, like what were the results of the work that you did with Food Recovery Network? If your chapter recovered 10,000 meals in a semester, be sure to say that. Um, and and maybe I would encourage you to maybe put always try to think of who you're interviewing with. Um, we have our FRO our FRN lingo that we can go to. We talk about pounds of food recovered. Some people don't understand that as well. So you might want to think like, okay, maybe I should frame my impact that I had in terms of like meals provided to the community. Uh, but definitely, if you talk about this, explain food recovery. Don't assume people know what that is. Um, People usually understand food donation. That's a good touch point. Um, Definitely explain what your role was and then the impact that you had.
I
That's how I should
appreciate
have done
that.
it if I didn't.
Yes, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Like I said, we'll share a blog post with other examples as well, putting effort on your resume. But that's such a good point. I honestly hadn't even thought about it because I'm just in the depths every day in and day out talking about food recovery. But yeah, as we know, so many other folks in the world don't know anything about it. So I really appreciate you all sharing that. Um, yeah, go ahead, Jack. Did you have something else to add?
Just that um, I think Kelsey, you kind of said this earlier too, but one of the challenges with food recovery was like getting a business to admit that they have waste surplus.
Mhm. Yep.
And like this is the need to explain what food recovery is. It's very important because folks don't food waste is so hidden. Um, Sometimes being able to explain that this is a problem in the community when you're going for a job, especially one that's sustainability, environmental related, can have a really big impact on how folks respond to you in your application and your interview. So coming in with that knowledge, being able to explain it well, and why it matters, that's that's something you should prep for in an interview.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we just have a bit of time left, so I just wanted to remind folks in case you have any questions, please do share them in the chat. We can definitely pivot the conversation for any burning questions that folks have. But for now, I could just continue to chat. I'd love to hear from you all a bit about, the challenges of facing, when you're applying for your first job from you that you might recall, or particularly even within your career now that you're facing any current challenges. I just want to acknowledge for the students on the call, you all are absolute rock stars. And I'm sure a lot of adults in your life, especially if you're graduating, are saying how exciting this phase of life is and wishing you luck and everything. But just want to acknowledge that it's also very hard. It can be very overwhelming. I know when I was graduating, I wanted to like shake everyone to be like, why aren't you talking about the hard parts of this and how scary and frustrating the job searching process post graduation can be. So I don't say that to scare anybody, but more just acknowledge that that's a real part of the process. So for our panelists here, just want to would love to hear from you all of just any particular challenges that you have or are currently facing and how you're trying to overcome them. If anyone feels called to start.
I can share a small one that I feel like I ran into and tried to work through looking for my first job. I think, if you're interested in food systems or food recovery work, that's not always like a field that shows up when you're searching for jobs. So I think something I had to practice and figure out was like getting creative about, what kinds of organizations I should be looking at or what kinds of keywords to look for to find jobs that I was able to like hone in on some of those things that I was excited about food recovery work. So like jumping off of the link that Jack just shared, I think there's a lot of jobs in the food bank or the anti-hunger world that looking at nonprofits in that realm may have a lot of jobs in that space. And food systems jobs aren't always showing up in a field like that, but you might need to get creative around like just what you're searching for. Um, and then totally on the other side, I think going off of what Cassie had shared, um, when I was first looking for a job, I think you might get some pushback from people in your life around like, oh, that's not really like a job field necessarily, or like an applied application of like math or science or a job like that. But I think there's a lot of different jobs out there. You just have to get creative around um, just searching and finding those things that you get excited about and looking for those different skills or keywords around food recovery that show up in those jobs that you might be seeing that are posted.
Yeah, if I could just jump off of that as well, Grace. I know when I was graduating, particularly, I wonder if you felt this way graduating with sociology degree and maybe other folks in liberal arts. It's not like it doesn't pop you out into an exact career, unless you want to be like a social worker or something like that for within sociology versus something like an engineer or a biologist. It kind of pops you out into a field. And so that definitely can lead to the overwhelm. But I feel like being able to just try to narrow down a little bit of what you're looking for. For me, for example, I was really passionate about environment, like our environment and also social justice. I actually didn't participate in FRN chapter during my time, but I knew that was the case and I knew I wanted to work in nonprofit. So it kind of started me somewhere. So I really appreciate what you shared there, Grace.
Off
Yeah,
of
I
that.
totally agree with that. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead, Kelsey.
No, you're good. Having like what you were just saying, having kind of a direction and that narrowing it down, I think is really important. I think that's a challenge I face now is that I when I graduated, I kind of always said I want to be a designer in foodway systems and some capacity. And I think in my head I was thinking like dream job working for like Refed, which if anyone doesn't know Refed, you should look it up. And or like Project Drawdown or something like that. But realistically, I think a good avenue for me would be working in like consumer packaging, at least for like or at least being a designer for a food company, and getting into that industry now that I'm kind of mid-career, early mid-career, and I haven't had that, direct experience yet, is the challenge to overcome because it's one of those catch-22s where, you need the experience to get the experience, and it's like, well, but making connections, like my freelance stuff that I'm doing with Matriarch is a great way to get the experience, make connections with people, take on volunteer work to kind of be in the space that you want. But yeah, maybe just do some soul searching and figure out um, the industry that you want to find yourself in. If it's a nonprofit job, if it's not, and I remember that sometimes there's jobs that you'd be surprised that they exist in other like in the private sector, potentially. So yeah, do some exploring, meet people on LinkedIn, go join like other webinars like this one, and like there's a lot of them online, and you'll be able to get an understanding of what other people do, and that can be really good at inspiration.
I would definitely to that point about needing experience to get the experience. That's a challenge. So I would say looking at fellowships, especially I put a link to a few of them in the chat. Um, well, two different programs, but AmeriCorps is an amazing program. The pay's not great, I'll admit that, but you get through it for a year, and that can open up a lot of doors. Um, Another thing I'd say is important to think about is where the location, like where you're landing these first jobs. Um, this has been I have little I have no room to complain. I get to live in the Bay Area. And it was probably the best place I could have landed for this work. Um, but one thing I will say is that the networks of people that I've developed throughout my career to date, very Bay Area specific. Maybe greater Northern California. Um, but that's definitely something that I'm coming to terms with. Like this is this is where my career foundations are. I can't, um, it's you get 6, 7 years into something, it's harder, at least in maybe it's the industry I'm in it too, local government, but it's it's not so easy just to jump over to New York or Chicago. Um, I feel like there's room to grow and opportunities in the Bay because of the network I have here, but where you start working is where you're going to have your network primarily. So it's worth considering.
That's such a good point, Jack. Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because it's like in nowadays of like remote work versus like in-person work and everything like that. But yeah, going back to being able to narrow down place-based is also helps a lot. I also just want to encourage for folks, your first job outside of college does not define your entire career. Of course, once you kind of get into something for a few years, a lot easier said than done. But if you're ready to pivot, it's possible to pivot. I remember thinking that, my first job was going to define everything. And I've been blessed to be able to work at Food Recovery Network for so long and really just fallen in love with it. But, it may not shape the entirety of my career. I could go many different ways from here. So I just want to encourage that as well. I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves for that very first job, which yes, it's important, but kind of building off what Kelsey said of just like getting the experience, right? Kind of helps you get into the door and then you can grow from there. Um, I know we just have a couple of minutes left, so just kind of want to do a speed round closing out. If our panelists have any final advice or just thoughts that they want to share with our audience here. Grace, I'll go ahead and get started with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing sort of jumping off what Jack shared about like network building and how you can tap into that. I found it really useful when I was in undergrad to tap into the alumni network at my college, both just for like looking at ideas of what jobs people have. You could also like search location based in my alumni network. So I think that can be really useful to look in certain locations and certain job fields. And then I was lucky enough to be able to like connect with some people just to talk with them about their career journey. And one of those ended up, I was able to get like a summer AmeriCorps role at a food bank through one of those connections. So I think generally anyone in your alumni network is usually pretty excited or open to speaking with you, and it can't hurt to just shoot them an email. There's no harm in reaching out. So I think that can be a really useful channel, both for ideas and then also to learn and maybe get some leads.
I'd just say your food recovery network experience is really impactful. Don't be afraid to bring it up when you're looking for your next role. It should definitely be something you call out.
My advice, not even related to anything food recovery related, just like in general as a person, lesson learned is like that it just really rings true is that um, building like a reputation for yourself is really important. And people remember how you lift people up more than what you accomplish at all. Like, you can list out all the things that are on your resume and all the numbers and everything that you did, and that's all important. But it's how you treat others, and you should always look for ways to give credit around because it's how you not only show respect but gain respect. And those are, the people around you are gonna then want to work with you, want to see you succeed as well. So I think that that's applicable across the board, right? Not even in professional life, in every facet of your life.
That's so well said, Kelsey. I really appreciate that. Before we close out, I did just see for folks that can stick around, Ricardo asked a question if any of our panelists feel called to answer. Any examples of outside of class projects a student looking to get into supply chain and logistics can do to stand out?
Gleaning, I would say.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So if anyone doesn't know, I mean, I think maybe a lot of people in this group do, but it's when you can work with farms to get, sorry, my cat is joining the call. Thanks.
Cute.
Um,
Love all the pets.
but yeah, you can work with farmers to if they have extra food in the field to help harvest that and donate that. And I think that again, if we go back to framing, you could frame it as working on supply chain logistics and cutting out a middleman and adding value and creating value for farmers. And yeah, there's a lot of ways that you could spin that, and also it's just fun.
I've got to run, but thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for the opportunity to share, um, and I'll see you all soon.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for joining and participating with us here today. And we hope you all have a great rest of your day.